What's up guys? Today we are going to make the R32 an even more cool street car by installing speakers and a new amplifier so we can get some good sound in it and I can use my phone to play music. It had like a Japanese head unit and some wonky speakers in it before that weren't even like mounted, so we're going to get a good setup dialed in. Now the amp that I'm going to be using is something that Taylor recommended to me. It's like a little mini Bluetooth amplifier, so I don't need to run a head unit and I can just have my Android tablet dash with the ECU master stuff. Ideally, I know a lot of you guys recommend this to me that I would run a head unit that has like tablet features, but it just doesn't work right with the ECU software, I guess. At least that's what people told me. So this seemed like a good solution. The original plan was that I would be able to hide this in here, be able to mount it nicely, but the thing is, wiring in here is such a mess and there's so much stuff going on, and the fact that this car already has weird wiring issues constantly going on with stuff up here, I want to take some of the advice that you guys were giving me. Ironically, you were telling me it would keep the wiring simpler and I would have less wires to run if I mounted it up front, but you guys might have forgotten my battery's in back. So I think it would be much simpler to mount this little guy in the trunk. Hopefully the Bluetooth will reach back here, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. I'm just gonna have it mounted right there. I guess it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's not like I have the prettiest trunk right now. Down the road, I'd like to try to clean this up, but for now, this is the simplest way because I can run power right here, ground right here, two of the speakers will be here, and then I just have two speaker wires going to the front. So that's what we're gonna start off doing today. I didn't get anything crazy. I basically got what I could next day ship on Amazon Prime. So I wound up getting an 8-gauge grounding and power kit for an amplifier, and I will just be wiring everything up very simply, just like this. I'm probably gonna leave all the wires uncut for the time being until I really decide that this is where I'm gonna leave it. So for now, I'm just gonna install everything probably with the max length wires. That way I can always adjust later on. A very valid concern that I saw you guys mentioning in the poll in regards to mounting the amplifier in the trunk was the concern that if there is any sort of accident or anything, that the wires may touch and short or cause a fire. So what I did to be extra cautious, I oriented the wires in a way so that the power wire and ground wire do not cross. And I also went a little bit extra with the heat shrink on them just to make sure that if something does happen, they're very protected and they're not going to short on each other. And yet again, to keep everything simple and wired in the trunk, I'm gonna use the remote turn on for the amp connected to the relay for the fuel pump. I don't care about having the amplifier working just when the key is in like the half on position. I only want it to be on when the car is really running because I don't want to accidentally like leave it on and have it like drain the battery or something, since I don't have a head unit where I can visibly see that it's on. So what I'm going to do is basically just splice into that wire that's sending signal to the relays, and then I'll just have one very tiny wire and that's it. Conveniently enough, this car already had an aftermarket speaker panel or whatever you want to call that piece that would sit up here. So it was very easy, since I had this wood piece laying out of the car, to quickly mount up some speakers that I had laying around. Nicole actually got me these Infinity speakers, I think for my S13, and I didn't use them for whatever reason. So they worked perfectly with these. Alberto recommended these nice little boom cup things that I think will just get sandwiched in there. Probably could adhesive them, but I don't know if it's going to be necessary yet. And then I just poked some speaker wire through the hole. So it's very, very simple. So believe it or not, this little guy is actually meant for boats, but I just used a stepper drill bit and found a good spot right in the center console, so then I can control the amplifier, or technically my music and everything that I want to do with it, right from here inside the car, and then I just have to run these wires back to the trunk. The only tedious part thus far of the whole process is just that I'm having to extend all the wires for that little Bluetooth controller, since I guess usually people have it mounted closer to the head unit or amplifier, I mean. I pulled the door panel off and tested the stock speakers, which technically aren't stock speakers. They actually sound pretty decent, so I'm just gonna leave these guys in. I didn't buy any different ones anyway, but they sound pretty nice, and I'm just gonna tap into the factory wiring in there. Even though it'd be nicer to run a new wire through here, it's a lot easier and it still sounds pretty good. You guys might have thought I was crazy since I had the hood painted like the OEM white instead of having Randy paint match it to the car, but look at how bad this paint is just from a little bit of clay bar. Get ready, it's gonna turn like brown. Not the paint, but like you'll see all the dirt. I wish they could hear it.
Yeah, it's really bad. It's all crunchy and nasty. Yeah.
Can you see all that brown? That's just all just like buried in the paint. It's disgusting. Check out how rad this is. If you guys remember from the track day, I wanted to get this little fan working so while I'm at grid I can have a little bit of extra cooling. So I talked to Alberto about wiring up a switch, and I had this toggle switch laying around, but I asked him if he could retrofit my rear window defogger switch. So what he did is he wired it in, so I can just press this now, and the fan turns on up there. How cool is that? I love little neat things like that. It seemed like it was pretty easy too, no?
It was pretty simple. So I basically used the stock AC blower relay, and I wired up ground from that switch. That switch already powers on, so I cut out everything and I made it be a switch for ground instead of a switch for positive. And then run a wire, use it for the AC fan relay, then run a wire from there to the switch, to the fan, and then it works that way.
But what if my rear window fogs? I'm just kidding, I'm just kidding. I'm also very, very stoked on how the little speaker job came out. I'll show you guys the amp in a second, but I can control everything right from in here. So I know you guys won't be able to really hear in here, but I have Bluetooth set up on my phone. It'll just automatically connect. It sounds great, and it goes really loud. It doesn't even get fuzzy or anything. It's got a decent amount of bass because the back are really close. That's good. Alberto can confirm when he was in the car working before.
Annoying. He had a messaging sound through the speaker. I was like using the power. Beep. Like, what is going on? It was so annoying. It was horrible.
Like imagine your ringtone when you get a text, but at full volume in your car. And you're Alberto. That's crazy. As a side note, Matt did a full correction on the car today, and if you guys remember how off the trunk and the hood were, remember I told you I had Randy paint it the color of the actual code rather than matching the car for a reason. Look at it now. It almost matches perfectly. That's pretty dang close. Obviously some parts of the car have been repainted. You can tell that this door is a slightly different color than the back panel. The roof you could tell was repainted. I mean, this car probably was pretty faded out, but overall now it's a much, much closer match. We also did have an issue where Alberto finally got the AC working, but we had the battery drain problem again. Alberto, what did you have to do?
So I figured out what makes sense. So every time I hook up the AC to work, it will stay on and drain the battery. So what I ended up having to do is I wired up the AC to be like a switch to the ECU, like a switch input, and then one of the outputs to the compressor. But for some reason, it was staying on after you turn off the car. So what I ended up doing, I put a diode on the switch input from the AC unit to the ECU, and then that fixed the problem. So now it can't have current back to the unit, and then it shuts off once you turn the car off.
Sick. So, made a lot of progress, just little stuff. Oh, I'll show you guys the trunk right now. It's still a mess. Got to clean up the wiring a bit. But if you look, I have the amp just mounted in there. It's not the ugliest thing in the world, but I guess it's not the cleanest thing in the world. I want to find a new spot for the ground and kind of just clean up this trunk area. But for now, you know, it was a pretty easy job. When you said